Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sincerely Agile with Mary. On this platform, we are here to unlearn, learn, and relearn, make change agents of ourselves. And of course, it's a platform where we want to be awesome and wholesome together. Now, today we're looking at agile transformations, and this is a topic that is so dear to my heart. As an agile coach, I go out there to help individuals, teams, and organizations become a better version of themselves. But it's also, an area where we're having a lot of challenges. So to have this conversation with me, I've got Simon Powers joining me on the screen. Hello, Simon.
Hi, Mary. Thanks for inviting me.
H-
Fantastic. Good to see
How
you.
are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. It's always a little bit of a challenge in these when the nights draw in and it feels a bit dark and you don't want to get up in the morning. But overall, yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Nice to have you on the show. Thank you for making time. I mean, talking about the weather, I felt like that a couple of days ago. I had been invited to some, stuff in London, and I looked at the weather and I was like, oh my God, do I really have to step out? It was cold, it was rainy, it was windy, but I did anyway because it was an occasion that was dear to my heart. Now, Simon, it's good to have you on the show. I'm really excited you're here, and I'm excited that we're talking about agile transformations. And of course, you are the founder of AWA, Adventures with Agile. And anyone who's taken enterprise and CAT courses probably would have come through your organization at some point or the other. Now, talking about agile transformations, there's a lot of problems there, but we'll come back to that. But how have you been in the last few months? How have you, you know, adapted with regards to your business? Because obviously you did a lot of face-to-face training before COVID. How has that gone?
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, our business was face-to-face coaching, face-to-face sort of agile transformations, face-to-face communities, meetups, and of course, face-to-face training. So, March 2020, and we're not allowed to do our business. Our business stops overnight, and we have to adapt. So, I was really, really pleased with the team when we realised this, and we put together obviously online training and online
Mhm,
coaching. We've
mhm,
had online meetups as has everybody. And we worked so hard to translate the training courses, first of all, by their format into the online experience. And of course, we've got better and better at that over the last sort of 18 months or so. We were pretty, when you look back at it, back into March 18 months ago, we were quite naive with the platforms and things, but we've certainly had a huge amount of experience now to sort of upgrade that. And then, of course, secondly, not only the format, but what we teach is organizational change. We have to be
mm,
current, we have to be up to date. And so organizations have changed hugely, which means that our content has had to change as well to sort of
mm,
reflect what people need to do and how they operate now. So it's been a huge time of transition, and it's not been without its pain. Obviously, when you're going from thriving business to zero overnight and then have to rebuild that online, it has been stressful. You can see I've lost most of my hair. But we're getting there. We've done it.
I know. I
Yeah.
mean, I saw a picture of you the other day on one of your posts, and I was like, oh, Simon is looking a lot younger in this one.
It was probably a younger photo. No, I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. It's been a challenge, but I am very much looking forward to getting back. Not in the office like we were before, but
Yeah,
something between. I
yeah,
do need people, real people. I know we're all real people, but
I know.
yeah,
I know. I mean, I'm not looking forward to, being back in the office full time either. And we've got some people joining us, and we're streaming on different platforms: Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Now, let me hit you with my first question, Simon. Now, I
fantastic.
put out a post, actually, a poll on LinkedIn the other day, and the overwhelming response was that, a clear why and alignment was for the most part, for the most part missing. What are
Mm.
your thoughts on that?
Well, it's actually a brilliant question because it gets right to the heart of how we as human beings learn
Mm.
and how we as human beings are motivated. And when we think about, when we examine sort of learning models and how we coalesce in organizations to get things done, we can see that there's actually sort of multiple loop learning. So single loop learning is where we sort of look at the current context and we say, how do we become better? How do we become more efficient? And many of the sort of agile transformations are around efficiency. How do we cut costs? How, like lean, for example, how do we get
Yeah.
stuff out the door? How do we get things to flow quicker? This is like your first sort of loop of learning. The second leap of learning is
Mm.
more like, well, what about different contexts? How do we become more efficient in different contexts? And then really the third loop of learning is really what I call the soul or the heart of the business. And this is the why. It's like, why are we doing any of this? What's the
Mm-hmm.
point of this? And as we sort of, as we as people sort of grow into adulthood and start sort of questioning, why am I doing this job? And what is this bringing to me? We start to look for answers that are greater than the paycheck, greater than paying the mortgage. And
Mm-hmm.
the first thing we look at is, what am I doing in my day to day? Why am I turning up? And
Yeah.
if an organization hasn't gained that sort of level of awareness of,
Mm-hmm.
why are we doing this? Why am I making these pharmaceuticals? Why am I especially banking? Why am I here? Am I
Yeah.
purely here to make somebody else's money? Is that what my life is about? And you can see this within the leadership sort of town halls or reports, or the way that the communication goes out in the business. You can read between the lines. Why are we here? And if that why is making money, it's like, making someone else money,
Mm.
then people aren't motivated. So when we
At
look at,
all.
what you're motivated to a point. You can show
Yeah.
up. I'm
Yeah.
motivated to turn up because I need to eat. My family needs to eat, so I'll show up. But that's not good enough in an agile transformation, because what we're looking for is to be connected and engaged with our audience, with
Yeah.
our customers. I mean, with the people who are paying the business. And because we live in a fast-paced, complex world, we have to be in tune with what's going on in the organization and without. And that takes effort if you're not motivated, if you're not engaged. And
Absolutely.
so this why helps people to connect in with what is needed to be done by the business, so that we show up with enthusiasm and energy and put that into the work, and then we end up doing the right work in an efficient way.
Right.
And
And we have to be connected to that why. We have to be
mm,
purposefully connected to that why.
yeah, and if the why doesn't resonate with us in the business, well, then
I'm
find
losing.
somewhere else to
Okay.
work. But if you can really motivate yourself around what your organization does, and you can be proud and say, I work for this
Mm.
place because they're doing this difference in the world, and that's worth me telling
Absolutely.
you about. People tell
Abs-
everybody about what they're doing, and
Mm.
that's good, right? So
Fantastic. Now,
yeah.
we've got a few more people joining us, so I'm just going to introduce you properly to our audience, Simon. I've got your bio right here in front of me. So here goes. Simon Powers is the CEO and founder of Adventures with Agile, the training and coaching company and global community of practice for agile and organizational change. Over the last 2 decades, Simon has worked with leaders to improve their organizations, meet their objectives, and create a productive and happy work environment. Based on his extensive experience, Simon has created a program of certified training courses that are extremely effective in upskilling leaders, managers, and teams in agile and organizational change. He has contributed to setting the industry standards through IC Agile, Disciplined Agile, and the wider community. He has earned the respect of the Agile community and seen as a thought leader and entrepreneur for organizational change and agility. He has won multiple Agile awards and has written many articles and created videos that have shaped the way people think about Agile and organizational change. It's so good to have you here on the show, Simon. Now, you talked about happy, being happy. Now, should that be a why for Agile transformation?
Well, that's a fantastic question. I don't think that it's enough. I think that it is. I think that it is part of it, absolutely. I think that when we look back on our lives, imagine that you have got to the end of your life, or what is a thought exercise for anyone watching, and you look back over your life and you say, was I happy?
Hmm.
Did what I do make me happy? What did it make others happy? Did it relieve suffering around us and make the world a better place? Or was it meaningless? Or did I really spend my time turning wheels, cranking handles?
Yeah.
And I think that that's an important question that sooner or later everybody asks themselves.
Hmm.
What am I actually doing with my life? And if we can
Yeah.
create organizations that is worth getting up for in the morning, that we can tell our children that we are proud of what we've done, and that's the legacy I've left behind, not only for myself being happy in my day to day, but for those around me.
For those
Someone can,
around you.
so
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's a very important part of organizational change. I think that why would we not want to create places where people are happy? I don't think it's enough. I think that obviously we also need to create businesses which make money. We also
Hmm.
need to create businesses which have an impact on the world, and sometimes that impact, I wouldn't necessarily describe it as happy, but hopefully it's a positive one. So we've got kind of these different elements that take place in if we're thinking about designing an organization, but
Hmm.
certainly happy staff equals productivity, equals innovation, equals psychologically safe spaces, all these kind of things that we need to have relationships.
Hmm.
And obviously relationships make business. So yeah, it's very
Absolutely.
important. Mm,
Yeah, loving Mondays, essentially loving Mondays, getting up on on Monday mornings and feeling great that you're going to a place of work where you're, happy, where you can show up fully. I mean, for me, going back 6 years when I extended my, consulting portfolio into the agile space, my light bulb moment with agile was what I could see immediately that this could do for humanity, because it's all about, well, it's mostly about how we connect as people, isn't it? It's mostly about how we, create safe spaces. I mean, we have the practices, we have the tools, but
mm,
without the people side of that, of agile being successful, then I mean, the tools and, practices does nothing for you. And when I look back often at the values and principles, or when I'm having a conversation with my mentees, I always find myself coming back to that first value. You know, they got the values so right, didn't they? 20 years ago, they really did get that right.
yeah, it is absolutely true.
Yeah,
People over process. When we get the people side of it right, the process comes out of that.
absolutely.
If we try to force the process first, which is where the challenges come with some of these agile frameworks,
Yep,
uh, then unfortunately we don't see the results and we get more of the same. And
we
that's the
don't.
thing, because
We
so
don't.
many have had processes forced upon them that
Mm-hmm.
even the word now, agile, many people immediately freeze up in fear that, oh my god, agile's come to town, and I think that's such a terrible shame, because it has such potential and it's been so abused, with people who either haven't got it or wanted to sell something to people who didn't understand it, that I think that in some cases, in some
Mm.
areas, that the name itself has a challenge, but the promise that it holds is real and
Yeah,
necessary and needed.
yeah, and it's okay to sell something, just sell the right thing, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And understand what it is that you're selling. Yeah.
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 Okay. So agile transformation failure rates have remained quite high as reported annually from credible sources. What are we struggling with? What are we really struggling with when it comes to agile transformations?
Well, I think that we've already sort of
Yeah.
touched upon it a little bit, and it's a little bit more complicated than just saying that it's about the people. For sure, it is. I think that the real crux of the problem now is different than perhaps it was a few years ago. But right now, we have a real leadership issue in most organisations, and this is where I think the challenge lies, because leaders are successful because that's where they've got to. They are running the show, and often internally, the very strategies that they've used to get them there are the very strategies which are causing the challenge for the organization to move towards agility. So if you've had 20, 30 years of working successfully, why on earth are you going to change that? Unfortunately, the world has changed the things that make organizations successful now, at least on the long term, medium to long term, are not the same things as they were 20, 30 years ago. And so the leadership approach to organizations, although it's got them that far, it's not taking them any further. Example of this is the banking and fintech, where I've spent a lot of my time. We've got something, I forget the exact figures, but it's numbers of trillions of dollars invested in fintech companies, which are eating the banks alive. And this is because these small companies are able to adapt with agile ways of working and are able to take business from the big monolith companies. So the big companies want to change towards agile, but unfortunately the leadership styles are so entrenched that it makes it very, very difficult to create the types of relationships we were talking about, the types of people places where people can make quickly and bring out new solutions. The organizational structural side of things, as in people in silos and passing work along with massive amounts of delay and handoff, is actually now fairly easy to fix, but not without the mindset and the leadership space. And that's really what I'm seeing. So I won't mention the name, but I had a client very recently who we were invited into the boardroom and asked to sort of give a coaching help. And with the coaching advice that was given, or that was not much advice, but the sort of what came out of those coaching sessions, the leadership was very much, oh, we're not ready for that. We don't want to hear that. And as a result, it was very much like, okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on and carry on with what we were doing before. And of course, carrying on doing the same thing as before is going to get the same results. Other companies we've had have absolutely embraced that, and you do see those changes really moving forwards very quickly. So you can weigh up the differences and say, well, look, we've got a leadership team here who is willing to look inside and say, oh my goodness, look at the way that I'm turning up, because I've just by accident marginalized those people over there. By accident, not willingly, I've gone and silenced that group, or I have not allowed people to step up and become entrepreneurial product owners, for example, because every time they do, I criticize them and tell them to get things done quicker. And to look at yourself and say, oh, I realize how I'm behaving here, and I've got to face that and do something about it, show up differently. And often people don't even know how to show up differently. That's hard work. And that's the work that needs to happen for this to work. And often it doesn't. And that's the reason why Agile is not working, in my opinion.
Wow, there's a lot of responsibility for leadership here. And I also hear from what you're saying that, just like we said before, and I often say that agile transformation is fundamentally human transformation. So it's about us changing. And that is not so easy to do within an organizational context, right? They need to hold the mirror up to their face. It's easy for them to talk about strategies, easy for them to talk about the hard stuff. But when it comes to the soft issues of behaviors and, safety, that is so difficult for a lot of people to do. Why, Simon?
I think it's a kind of feedback loop. I think it's a reinforcing loop that happens in society as a large, as well as in organizations. And there's a loop between the way that leaders are able to show up in a safe space, the structures which the leadership find themselves in inside the whole of organization, and the culture which relates from those structures, which then feeds back into how free leadership is. So if leaders don't feel free enough to admit mistakes and say, oh, sorry, I realized I didn't know the answer to that one. If they're not free to do that, then they will then act in a certain way which reinforces the structure of rigidity, of we've got to get this right. And that then forces around the same culture, and it reinforces itself. And somebody has to break that.
Mm-hmm.
But often
somebody has to break that loop, because like you just said, I mean, what I'm picking up from that is they're not comfortable with vulnerability.
Yes, exactly. And if anyone who's done any enterprise coaching would have sat in boardrooms, they would have sat with leaders, and I've sat with a lot of very company, Fortune 500 type company boardrooms, and it is surprisingly different in different companies. There are some companies where nobody wants to say anything which is going to risk making us look like we don't know what we're doing, we're off schedule, or anyone is going to stand out or make a mistake. Other companies, people welcome that. And the difference between how much those companies can absorb the type of coaching, training, and mentoring that we give is radically different. So it depends on, so this is the challenge. So how, the challenge is really, how do we slowly soften that culture? How do we
Yeah.
slowly get people to feel safe, to enable them to start? And often that's the CEO's responsibility to create that space within the boardroom.
Mm-hmm.
But that often isn't the case. Often the person who's had the light bulb, who realizes this stuff, because normally the reason why we're there is because someone on that boardroom has got it and they want us to help. They want our help to free up the rest of that team. And if that person isn't the CEO, if that person is somebody who doesn't have that authority within the other heads within that room, then it can be touch and go. Sometimes it works and that team softens and we have a
Mm-hmm.
massive breakthrough, and sometimes it doesn't. And that person is either marginalized or we are marginalized or something doesn't work. But that's the skill of what we do. It's really about giving that favorable odds, making it more probable that we have that softening at that level,
Mm.
which creates that ripple effect through the organization, to enable people to connect, and that's where you see the results. Mm.
Yeah. And I mean, I like what you said that these, decision makers, the CEOs, some have been in this space for decades. And it's the same behavior is the, leadership style that has gotten them to where they are. So they find it difficult to want to change that. But however, like you said again, the environment is changing. We see fintechs being so successful, and competing with organizations that, established organizations that have been around for over 100 years. I mean, you would have thought that that's um, alone, that evidence, if you like, evidence of
Mm.
fintechs, evidence of, a different kind of culture, evidence of responsiveness because of the flatter organizational structure or network structure, if you like, that it would compel leaders of more hierarchical organizations to begin to really look into that, to say, you know what, about time we started changing. Now, my next question, I think, okay, what is fundamentally wrong with the way we plan for agile transformations? And I ask this question because we've just talked about, what are the challenges, but when we then do decide to transform, are we doing it right? Are we planning the right way?
Yeah, and I think, as you rightly say, you made the statement a second ago of why don't leaders like realize this with, say, the fintech example. Well, I think that they are, as you say, they are realizing it, and then they say, right, well, what are we going to do about it? And this is where the planning comes in. And the first thing that happens is that the planning happens in exactly the same way as the pre-agile transformation, which is, right, well, we know what we want at the end, so we've got to plan it all out in multiple year change program. And then what happens is that we basically predict and control everything we can to get to that point, where we think agile is, what agile means to me. But the very nature of agility, first of all, requires a mindset shift. It's that hard work we talked about inside, and often that plan is then delegated to, could be head of or something, some other person in the organization, could even be one of the board CXO person, but it's delegated and delegated, and it's like, right, you lot over there have got to change the way you're working, and we'll sit and wait and see what the results are, which is the fundamentally wrong mindset, because that mindset is all about, it's about that predict and control, whereas agility was never meant for predictable problems. Agility is designed around to enable companies to thrive, or organizations to thrive in the face of unpredictability, to thrive in the face of complexity. When we don't know exactly what's going to happen next, we want to make sure that we win when we don't know what's going on, and that the more uncertainty there is, the better off we are.
Hmm.
Whereas when we put in place structures which are determined by how much control and predictability we have, that's the opposite. That's putting in a structure that means that we'll thrive if our predictions are correct. And so what this means is that we're setting up an agile transformation in a rigid way, when the whole point of going towards agile was a turbulent and unpredictable world. So it doesn't make any sense to do that. And so what has to happen, again, it sits with leadership to realize that you haven't got a clue what's going to happen in your organization in the next 5 years. And that's okay, because we've got systems which allow you to thrive and be the best in that situation. But often that's a very scary thing to admit, because if you think about the way capitalism works and what you've got to report to the markets, no one is going to invest in your company if you stand up and say, I haven't got a clue what's going on or what's going to happen in the next 5 years. So what we've got is a fundamental mismatch between reality and what we're allowed to say and do.
Wow, that is powerful, Simon. You've just nailed it.
Yeah, and this is why it's so hard, because we have to pretend we know exactly what's going on, and we know exactly where our company is going, and we know exactly how we're going to get there, and yet you haven't got a clue.
We have to pretend. I mean, we're talking about a VUCA world. It is
Yeah.
volatile, it is uncertain, it is complex, and it is ambiguous. And we're coming from an era where we would normally go for a 2-day strategic planning, activity and plan for the next 5 years. Now, what you're telling me now, or what we're hearing from you, is that we are still in that mindset where we are pretending that we know exactly what's happening. We are planning as though we can predict 2 months from now, which we can't, to be honest, in this climate. We are operating in a very complex environment, but we're pretending that we know what is happening, all because of share prices and stuff like that. If that is a huge reason for this approach, then we're in for a lot of agile transformations that are perhaps not going to be successful for a very long time, because that is a big reason. That is a very, very important statement you have just made there. For a CEO to say, I don't know, I mean, their share prices could be coming down tomorrow in this, kind of environment. So what do we do? This is a catch 22.
Well, the good thing is that the light at the end of the tunnel, if you like, isn't an on train. Is actually it is actually the freedom out of the tunnel, and this is what agile processes are for. This is what the agile mindset and the agile way of working is actually designed for. It's to enable us to make the absolute most of uncertainty and unpredictability. What it means is that we have everybody in the organization working on the most optimal thing that they can be working on right now. And that gives us the most chance, the lowest risk, to enable us to meet whatever outcomes that it is that we are working on. We talked at the beginning about this why, strategy, operations. I called it the first leap of learning, second leap of learning, third leap of learning. Well, when we're looking for predictability, what we're looking for predictability in is short-term operational work. We look for less predictability in our perhaps in our strategy, but really when we come to the why, the purpose, we have a rock solid, unmovable why, and this gives us this sense of whatever happens, we're going to achieve that why, but we don't know how. So our
Exactly.
strategy to get there is incremental and works towards that why, and our operations is fairly linear, but we are sort of operating on a well, can we try this? Did that get us a little bit closer? Oh no, that didn't. Okay, well, what about this then? And so each thing we try, we meander until we get that why, and that's what we do. And if we are constantly working with low risk increments to get to that place where we achieve our why, then you've got a motivated workforce operating at low risk, making decisions exactly where they need to be made. And that gives us a massive operational advantage than this sort of centralized short-term or small amount of planning for long periods of time. High risk, with decisions being made furthest away from the complex nature of the work we do.
Right,
So,
which is true.
yeah. Mm.
And we have had organizations that suffered from that. They were so far off from where the real work was happening. People who did the work didn't have the authority. They couldn't take, decisions on the fly. And we're still having that same problems. I mean, I don't even have to name them. It's all over the internet. So many organizations that fail to innovate. So many organizations that fail to, to move away from the traditional way of doing stuff, and they paid a heavy price for it. And you would think because of those facts, that are everywhere, and that clearly points at rigidity, would mean that more people are willing to be flexible today. I mean, another thing you've said is that, agile is what we do to some parts of the organization, away from leadership. Meanwhile, this should be starting with leadership, even in the way that they work. They should also be organizing themselves as an agile team, stepping into that mindset and being really aware of the privileges they have, because you feel safe doesn't mean everyone else in the organization feels safe. And to be willing to say, you know what, maybe perhaps we have gotten it wrong, and step into that empirical mindset of, just experimenting, essentially, because it's a very volatile environment. So you just simply nailed it there. You just simply nailed it there. Now let's move on to the next question. The Agile Manifesto is 20 years old. It's been around. I mean, if Agile was a human being now, that's an adult right there. But what is missing in the knowledge that is required to make Agile work? I mean, we've talked about the people side of things. We've talked about, psychological safety, essentially. We've talked about, showing up the right way and all of that people side of things. But what else is missing? Because it's been 20 years. And like I said at the beginning of this show, year on year, we've got, a lot of statistics coming out from, credible sources, talking about reporting on, agile transformation. And looking at those figures, it can certainly be better, especially for the amount of money these organizations are spending. That's number one. A lot of money goes into agile transformation. Number two, the whole point of agile, well, one of the reasons I would believe that, we're going agile is to create a happy work environment where people are less stressful, where people don't have double the workload that they used to have. And it seems this is not happening. So what is missing in the knowledge that is required to make agile work? Because I would love to see it work. I work in that space. It's a space I will continue to, work in, and I want to get better and better as an agilist, which is why I'm constantly investing in myself to get better. The success of the agile space, is something I'm extremely passionate about, which is why we're having this conversation now. So what is missing, Simon?
Brilliant, thank you. So the Agile Manifesto itself is the Agile Software Manifesto. The first thing that happened with the Agile journey was that, Agile was in the software world, and it expanded out because we were seeing that organizations have been split into these silos, which meant, and by silos we mean departments or teams specializing in particular skill sets or job functions, rather than a flow-based organization which is focused around customer-centric delivery. So the first thing is to recognize that the Agile Manifesto is actually the Agile Software Manifesto, and that when we look into the sort of principles and the values, they are absolutely fantastic, but we need a bit more than that when we go to the enterprise space, because obviously organizations are a lot more than just software. So in terms of what's missing is we can start in different places. I mean, from a software perspective, we could even start there and work outwards to sort of follow the journey of Agile as a little story. So the first thing is something which we pretty much cracked around 2005, 2006, which is really good, solid, test-driven, integrated delivery. So integration testing, all those kind of things where you have the ability to change something and know whether you've broken it within a few seconds. And those kind of the sort of technology around that, we mastered that as a human race, if you like, about 2005, 2006. Yes, there's been refinements. Yes, there's been upgrades in the software and all those kind of things. But really, we cracked that one. And yet 2021, still seeing organizations which do perhaps a little bit of testing but not really full integration testing of their estate. So there's basic tools and things which need to be in place for agility to work, and they're easy, they're tangible. Most developers, within your teams will know how to do this. But the problem is it does take time to set up. It does take amount of money to invest and to get the systems working. And often organizations are so busy, so flat out, that they haven't invested in this. And as we know, these problems increase exponentially as whilst testing isn't in place. So before too long, you've got multiple years worth of investment you'd have to back invest to actually get out of the hole. And then, of course, once organizations get to that, they're actually what they call sort of code bankrupt, if you like. The technical debt, to use that analogy, has got so great that they can't get out of the hole. So this is a real problem with organizations in terms of their software base. But as we start going wider, the knowledge of how to structure organizations is also very poor. Many organizations now are taking on this concept of value streams, which is a fantastic beginning, but it really is only the beginning. And the idea of the value stream is at least to map out the dysfunction of what is actually happening right now in an organization. And so when we look at the way that work is handed off from one place to another, we can analyze and measure the delays. We can measure where work is stockpiling or where it's a bit thin. And we hope that work goes in one end and out the other end, pretty much in the same order that it's applied. And then we can measure that and make it more efficient. But really, that's the tip of the iceberg. The knowledge of actually how to restructure an organization using a value stream, for example, to create what I call real teams, where people can create customer value without having to have handoff and delays. Those kind of things are actually sadly lacking, I think, in management and in many agile coaches even. How do you restructure an organization and at the same time keep the work that's in progress, keep going out the door? And that's a big challenge. Often people think of it as too much disruption. And then the final piece really is around this idea of feedback and coaching. So when we think of people as fungible assets, meaning that you can swap one person out with another, we're missing a trick here, because the nature of complexity is such that the tacit knowledge, the knowledge that is inside each person's head, is actually very, very valuable. And when we lose staff through high turnover, we're actually doing the business not only a financial cost, but there's a huge loss in knowledge which moves around all the time. And in banking, for example, there's up to a third turnover in some organizations in a year. And I see this in automotive. I see this in many organizations with this huge turnover. And so when we start looking at how can we create organizations where people aren't leaving, that they are actually growing and creating within these teams, with these tools, how can we get them to be innovative and free thinking, so that we can stay ahead? And they're the things that we talked about in terms of the psychologically safe spaces, leadership that are supporting. And along that, having facilitation at meetings, actually a proper facilitator. Having a facilitator's job is basically to help the people in the meeting get the most out of their time. And even now, I'm still not seeing organizations who are employing facilitators for meetings. And the cost of a facilitator in wages is nothing compared with the wastage that 100 people, say, have in an organization, in terms of the waste of time that we spend in these ridiculous meetings. So, and that's even more so now online than it was in the office almost. It's almost more so worse now. And then, of course, coaching. Part of a strategic management program to grow people, grow managers, in my opinion, should have a very strong element of professional coaching embedded within the management role, because managers' real role is alignment across different functions, but it's also managing and looking after those staff and helping them, give them the best that they can, creating the environment for us to get results. And really, one of the best ways of doing that is professional coaching. I have seen organizations we've worked with have embraced that wholly, and we've helped them set up a strategy to enable coaching to disseminate through the organization. And in those organizations, the staff turnover rate massively reduces. But people who think that coaches are a waste of money, and we're trying to measure that effectiveness as coaching in their micromanagement day to day, who haven't really made that mindset shift about people over process, those organizations are very slow to take on agility. This is why it's an agile coach.
Yeah.
It was the professional coaching part of that which was supposed to come in. But again, I'm not really seeing coaches find any measure of leadership position. Most of the coaches that we see when we go into organizations and people who come on the training, most, not all, but most have not found a place high enough in the hierarchy to enable that coaching to be effective. It happens within them, absolutely, but we need it all the way through the organization. So it's quite a lot there, but there's probably other things. That's a fair amount of stuff that's missing to make this stuff work.
A whole lot, Simon. You've talked about facilitation, you've talked about coaching, and of course, the coaching is to actually help the people side, of course. You've talked about organizing around value streams so that we can minimize handoff. But to get that going, I mean, it's like we keep coming back to this chicken and egg situation. For that to happen, then you need leadership to be in the right mindset to say, okay, let's go and experiment with this. Let's see what happens. Let's see if it works. They need to be in that empirical mindset. That is so important. Now, another thing that I was thinking about, you talked about the managers. Now, the managers also, they need to be coached into a different mindset. I mean, I often talk about managers being coached into the mindset of using the metaphor Gardner, that, they have to, because I mean, let's be sincere. People do have concerns when there is any form of change going on. Fear. Will I still have a job at the end of this transformation? So people are genuinely concerned, and people might want to just, protect themselves. I mean, survival. You think of yourself first when things are changing. It's human, nature anyway. But how can we tackle that problem first? Again, it comes back to leadership. So, whichever way you look at it, we still have to get back to that leadership space to say, we need you to step into this new space. We need you to align with us. We need to, be able to have an alliance with you to say that this is what we're going to be doing, and this, manage expectations, so to speak, for that to happen. Interesting. We'll get there. We'll get there, Simon. Now, another thing I would like you to talk about is your views on the Center of Excellence. First of all, is it needed? I'll make this a two-part question. First of all, do we need a Center of Excellence? That's number one. Number two, when we do have them, have we structured it properly? Have we staffed it properly?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. So the first thing is that, as you probably are aware, we have this AWA playbook. It's like kind of a start with leadership and work outwards, and we've got that. So anyone watching this, it's free. You can download it. It's in my book. If you're looking at starting with leadership and then working around structure and culture, look at the playbook, because this gives you a step-by-step approach of how to do this stuff. So with the Center of Excellence, I personally think it's an anti-pattern. I think that the Center of Excellence, the idea of a Center of Excellence, is immediately sets an idea of excellence being in a team, in a group, and that it kind of somehow emanates out from this wonderful team. Even worse is when the Center of Excellence is made up of agile coaches. The whole purpose of the coach is to enable the organization to be amazing. And by saying that we're the center of that excellence, it sets a mindset of that we're excellent and you're not. And I've seen that it just puts people's backs up. I mean, if I was to say, hey, look, AWA is the center of excellence and everybody else is got to learn from us. I mean, how arrogant is that? I mean, it's the same as what we're doing in organizations. These people over here, we're basically saying these are the arrogant bunch over there, and they're going to tell you how to be excellent. I mean, it just beggars belief that we even have that. There's such a thing as a community of practice, but that's a very different concept. It's not just a different name, it's a very different concept. And the idea of a community of practice is that because we're moving away from siloed based organization, and we're creating teams that can create value to customers with with minimal delay, then we need alignment of how people are working. So there's consistency across different value streams, across different methods of getting things to customers, different products perhaps, or different aspects of a product if there's no dependencies between them. And so we need some kind of consistency. And so this is very different than a center of excellence. This is a consistency approach. It could be also to do with learning the same things across different teams and different things, learning about the product, learning about skills, learning about how to communicate, learning about the company. So these things are really communities of practice, not centers of excellence. And even to have an agile center of excellence is even worse, because the idea of focusing on agile as a thing, as a noun, is also a complete anti-pattern. What we're actually trying to do is make a business amazing by doing amazing things for a great reason and serving someone somewhere so that people want our business. It's an important part of their lives and they're willing to either pay for it, or if in the case of a charity, for example, we're actually benefiting somebody directly and we're doing the right thing for them and we're not wasting supporters' money. Or if we're in the public sector, we're looking to serve the communities that we're around. And that's the purpose of the organization. It's not about agile. Agile is a way that organization does this stuff. It does whatever it's doing in a complex way. And so to make agile a center, again, it's this idea of oh, they're doing agile, or they're going to tell us how it is. They're going to tell us what to do. And it can't work like that. So anyway, I hear some frustration in my voice as I'm
I
saying this.
know, I know. I could feel it, Simon. I could feel it. I mean, at the end of the day, what you're saying here is like we're going back to the usual way things are done, where we over centralize, so to speak. However, when we then start this center of excellence where they do exist, have we even done that properly? Have we coached them properly? Have we structured it properly? Because the whole point of the Center of Excellence is to ensure that the transformation is a success. That's the whole point. So why is it
Well,
not working most of the time?
I think having a group of people who are there to help new ways of working, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing if we look at it from that perspective. For example, coaches, agile coaches, where coaches are funded from, for example, has a huge impact on their reach. So if coaches are funded as a headcount within a department, then they're limited to the scope of that department. And when we're looking at restructuring an organization to shift departments so that we have constant flow of value rather than handoff between different skill sets, then employing them within a headcount of a particular skill set means that coach is now locked within that remit, and that doesn't help enterprise agility. So when we're looking at employing coaches, we need them to sit outside of the current silo structure, because only then can you look in and say, right, well, what do we need to actually shift here? And so creating a budgetary structure which allows organizations to have a group of almost autonomous people which are going to help shift this organization is actually quite essential. What the problem is like them being in a bubble, and then sort of like an echo chamber of their own thoughts. It's great to have that support, but really those people should be outside of the current structure, but then working within those structures to change, to melt those structures in a way into something which is flow based. So I haven't. So there's a bit of contradictory in things what I'm saying there. One is that I do think that people need to be outside the structure, from a budgetary and a way of reshaping the actual structure of the organisation. But I don't think that they should be put on a pedestal in terms of this centre of excellence, which seems to make it out like they are the ones getting all the credit. They're the ones doing the transformation, because a true coach's role is to enable others to take credit for the work that they do in their day to day, and to make everybody else great. This is why it's so hard to measure a coach, because a coach doesn't stand there and say, hey, look at what I've done. Instead, a
Exactly.
coach says, wow, look at what they've done.
Yeah, absolutely, Simon.
Mm.
And this would perhaps be my last question. Now, big organizations tend to want the big bang approach and go fast with agile transformations. Is this a good idea? or is there a better way? I mean, I am not a fan of big bangs at all. Let's have your views.
So the idea of agility, once we're working in an agile way, if you like, or we have an agile company, is that we are able to constantly adapt to any changing demands. So it's not something that we do once; it's a way of working that should
Mm,
then be continuous and forever. So that any new things that come up, we're able to adapt around it. It's a way of adapting. You know, you could swap the word agile out for adapt. So how are we adapting? So we need to get from a non-adaptive organization to an organization which is able to work fluidly with whatever gets thrown at it so that it can thrive in the face of change at low risk. So I think that for the Big Bang approach, the enthusiasm generated by something which is a transformation can be transformational. So I do think that we need to have the full board behind it. There does need to be an investment of capital in terms of in perhaps employing different roles who do know how to do these things, or AWA, of course. There does need to be some capital in terms of investment, in terms of the tools and things, like we said earlier on with, say, development environments and things like this. So there does need to be an injection into this change to kick things off. However, we don't exactly know what's going to happen, just like any complex environment. So what we're looking to do is get a very firm path. We've got some very good practices. We know the patterns of how organizations work now. There's lots of books out there. There's lots of things about the optimal way to structure organizations. And then we need to take into account that we're working in a living system of human beings. And so that as we try to change a living system, things will come up that we did not expect. And so we need to work on this system with a good plan, with a good amount of enthusiasm, energy, and capital to get us going. But we need to work in an iterative way, working
mhm.
with real people to get the results that we wanted. And so that we can adapt our transformation program as the market changes as well, until we get into
Absolutely.
a sustainable way of
And
working.
like you said, that we have to do it in an iterative way. So essentially, we need to approach agile transformations in an agile way. I mean, I'm currently in the AWA cohort, and I know what I'm already learning within that cohort. And I like the fact that you talk about, I mean, the playbook. And if you're watching, you're interested in agile transformations, you're an agile coach, you really want to get the AWA playbook. It's free, it's online. You can find it on their website. It's online, it's free. Just type in AWA playbook, or link up with Simon Powers on LinkedIn. Now, the playbook is very systemic in its approach, and it talks about starting with leadership. It moves us away from delegating. Agile transformation is not something we do to some people. It's something we all have to do. We have to carry everybody along. It's not about creating new configurations for people to come and work in it. You you carry the people who are going to work in this new configuration. You carry them along, and you start experimenting with vertical slices of the organization. That is so important. So thank you very much, Simon. We're going to call it a day here. Please get the AWA playbook. If Agile is of interest to you at all, get the AWA playbook. It is amazing. It is very systemic in its approach. And please link up with Simon. Check out their website, with agile.com. Link up with Simon on LinkedIn. And they do run a lot of amazing courses. CATS, IC Agile Track, ENT, Enterprise Agile Coach courses, and of course the IC Agile Expert cohort, which I'm currently a member of that cohort, and I'm really excited at what lies ahead for me. It's a 9 month cohort. It's a long one. It's very intensive. It's keeping me, busy at the weekend, but I love it. I absolutely love it. So what's there not to love about the AWA playbook? So go download it and just start reading away. Simon, thank you so much for spending your Sunday evening with me. It's been an
Thank
exciting one. And I think we've got some comments here. I've got Peter, as we plan to work on a living system, things come up that we did not expect. Absolutely. Absolutely. Pete. Absolutely. Thank you for joining us here. And this is where we're going to draw the curtain because I have a cohort to go and attend to myself. So, Simon Powers, thank you so much for joining me on
Thank
Sincerely
you so
Agile
much.
with Mary today. And I will be talking later. And to our audience, also, thank you for joining me every Sunday. I hope you've had a good time with myself and Simon today. So, see you same time, same place next week. Next week, I have Adi DK with me, and we're going to be talking about women in the boardroom. So you don't want to miss that. Thank you very much, and bye bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care.